Hello again, everybody. I trust that you've had a good week, a good weekend. We had a bank holiday there, which was pretty good, and everybody had lots of fun. And maybe you played with a little bit of old audio equipment like I did. Today, for consideration, is a Nakamichi CR-1E cassette deck. This is a two-head deck, nice, high-quality transport. This is the upgraded version of the BX2 transport that we featured in a video not too long ago. This did away with the idler tyre out of the middle of the transport and put it down to one belt and one pinch roller. So this one is owned by a friend of mine, Nick. Hello Nick, if you are watching this. And he sent this in because there is an imbalance in the recording levels. Now what he said is that when he's making recordings at home, the left channel and the right channel are not balanced and are not correct. So that's something we're going to look at with this. It doesn't need any other further work. There's no servicing to be done. This is purely going to be investigation, possibly some calibration, and just going through my thought process of how we're going to work out what the issue is with the deck. So what Nick has said is, Nick has said that he sent me the deck with the recording levels where they seem to be balanced. So as you can see, the outside is the balance and the inside is the master. So I'm not sure whether he's suggesting that this is, he maybe thought this was left and right, or that just the levels were off, but basically he wants me to have a look at the levels to find out why it's just not particularly playing correctly. So the thought process that goes through this is we need to find out what the culprit is. Now these have an awful lot of ways you can change the levels. So you can change the playback level, you can change, or so we say adjust, you can adjust the meter level, you could also manually adjust any playback levels by tickling these knobs as you'd expect. But then also each individual tape type, now on Nakamichi it says EX, SX and ZX. These is a later deck, so they've actually put on type 1, type 2 and type 4 as we went into the type 1, type 2, 3 and 4, etc. EX, SX and ZX. The earlier decks like the BX2 just said EX, SX and ZX. So you can adjust the recording levels on the main board of this deck for each tape type. So that actually helps us in trying to work out what is the potential issue if there's a recording level offset, maybe between left and right channels, maybe between the master and the input. This means that if we produce a recording for every tape type and it's exactly the same, then it's possibly not the recording levels on the main board that is the issue. It could be the playback levels, for instance, or if one type records at different levels to the others, that needs calibrating. Everything that we're going to do today is in the service manual if you've got one of these decks and you care to look at it. But we're going to start with playing something back and making sure the playback levels are good for a start through the oscilloscope, and then from there we're going to input a signal, record it and see what our issue possibly is. Aside from that, this deck is in absolutely amazingly good shape. It's a nice slow eject, everything is all nice and clean and everything is all working. So powered up there, as you can see, there's no major issues, no crazy grinding or anything. We're just in the visual checks at the moment, and the first thing I'll do before I calibrate any deck is just give the head a cursory clean with some IPA, and then once we've done that we know that any signal we're putting in is the best possible signal that can go in from calibration tapes and everything else. So I'm just going to isolate the power for this so I don't get electrocuted, and then give the head a little bit of a wipe and a clean, which, to be honest, the heads are already pretty clean as it is. But if I don't do it, it'll potentially not rule something out. So let's put a test tape in. Alright, so test tape's in and rewound. I think this has been serviced relatively recently, so this should produce with the results we're expecting. So based on that playback on the oscilloscope, then we have one channel which is very slightly lower than the other. The left channel is slightly lower than the right channel, if you can see that on the camera. And if I present them together, the one I'm moving up and down is the right channel. And as you can see, if I match the bottoms of the waves there, the top is significantly higher. So this is telling me that the right channel is a little bit higher. And even if we look at the levels on the actual deck, the left channel is just flicking on and off at minus 10 dB. So that is also displaying the fact that there's a little bit of channel disparity on the playback. But the azimuth is honestly just about there. If I were to change my settings to test the azimuth, it's not far off, but it's not really there. So I'll possibly do that first, depending on what the order of service is in the manual for the electronics. I think the azimuth is the first thing to check. So the first thing to do is to set up the azimuth, because we know it's wrong, so we might as well do it. It's the left-hand screw of the head, similar to the BX2. I'm going to play out azimuth tone through this test tape, and then once we adjust that screw, our left and right channels will be in phase beautifully, as you can see there. So that is right channel, left channel, absolutely in phase with each other. If you can notice, they're actually two separate readings, but we're good. If we go on to the more traditional azimuth view, what you'd expect, it's a lot better than it was. It's opening in and out a little bit, but that's tape path, I'm going to suggest. But that's about as best as we're going to get with that. So, on to sorting out the levels for the meters. Okay, so in the service manual there, number 4 on the list is meter level calibration. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put 400 Hz into the input jacks whilst in record pause mode. We've got 2 points on the main PCB there, VR101 and 201 as it says there. And in this box it says we're going to feed in 400 Hz through the input jacks on the back and adjust the input level control, which is the volume knob on the front, to obtain 500 millivolts on the AC voltmeter, and that is taken from the output RCAs on the back. Adjust VR101 and 201 so that the 0 dB segment of the level meter starts illuminating. Right, let's go over to the deck and make sense of that. So back at the deck, what we're going to do is we're going to put 400 Hz from a signal generator into the deck. We're going to put a tape in and we're going to put it in paused record mode, which will allow the signal we're inputting into the back to go through the deck, through the electronics and out of the rear. And we're going to measure it at the rear and hopefully we'll get 500 milliamps. And as soon as we've got 500 milliamps, we can adjust those levels to only just light up to 0. So 400 Hz straight into the back of the deck. We are in record pause mode and we're going to use a cassette that is not pre-recorded, so it'll allow us to do that. And then we're going to take our multimeter sticks and we're going to stick them in the output stage RCAs and look for 500 millivolts. And if you haven't got 500 millivolts, you're going to turn this knob up until you do. And there we go, 501 millivolts. And right there, those yellow pots, which you can just see, there's 101 and there is 201. We're going to wiggle those until the levels drop, and then we're going to up them and up them and up them very slowly until the correct meter indication just lights. And that is the 0 dB indication, which is this one here. So we're going to lower it until it goes down, and then we're going to slowly bring it back up until it just lights. And the same on both channels, and then we'll know that those meters are calibrated correctly. It's a little difficult to see because the refresh rate is nearly matching my recording rate, but we can also check those millivolts and the difference between the two channels on the oscilloscope. So we have the right channel displayed there and the left channel displayed there, and they are the same. That's both channels displayed at the same time. As you can see, if I start moving it up and down, they match up very nicely just there. So we know that those levels are good, our inputs are good, and now we can set the levels on the front of the deck to match. So our adjusters is VR101 and VR201. respectively. So I'm going to get VR101, and then what I'm going to do is, without electrocuting myself, I'm going to drop this way down so you can see the effect it has, and then we're going to bring it back up again. So if I drop this way down, that's me removing the meter there. As you can see, it's going down, 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 down. These are really good pots actually, they're nice and tight, and I want it so that it's just illuminating the 0. Still turning, still turning, still turning, still turning, still turning. There we go, just illuminated. And we'll do the same thing with the other channel. I'm going to drop it all the way down, and I'm turning it so it just illuminates there. I'm putting the smallest amount of pressure on. So both of those now are calibrated as per the service manual, and calibrated in sync with each other, exactly as you'd expect now. So we're good with both of them. So the next question is, now that we know that the tones going in are correct and the levels are correct, what happens if we record a segment of that tone on this tape and play it back? So I've still got 400 Hz going into the input there. This is the same tone, same volume, everything that we've just done. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset the counter, and I'm going to let that record. We basically want to find out now whether it is either our recording levels that are off or our playback levels that are off. So the first step is to obviously record this tone, and then we're going to play it back and see what happens. Now I think you're going to have an imbalance here now. Let's have a look. This is a little bit of music previously. Our counter's just coming around to 0, and we've got an imbalance. So the left channel is showing higher than the right channel. Now the difficulty that we're going to have now is we need to work out whether that is at the recording stage or the playback stage. And there's a couple of ways we can do it that are a little bit common sense, but we can also use the service manual. But let's try the common sense approach first. So the common sense approach involves bros. So you have to have this bros tape. I'm lying, you don't. You just need any pre-recorded tape. So any pre-recorded tape, and we're going to play that back, and we're just going to have a look at the trend that this meter's kicking out and just see what's happening with the meter. So this is a pre-recorded tape, it's pre-Dolby and all the rest of the stuff. We've got Dolby on, but we don't have the ability to... There we go. And I'm going to play this, and we're just going to watch the meters and see what the trend is. Now as you're watching that, to me the trend is that the left channel is louder than the right for most of the time. Everyone agree? If you don't agree, put in the comments, that's fine. But to me, that left channel is louder than the right channel at all stages of this song. And it seems to be fading out there if you look, and it's still louder. Let's just do the same thing on the other side of the tape. So there we go, other side of the tape. Same situation, that left channel's a little bit louder, guys. Fast forward a little bit to a different part of the tape. Yeah, same again, left channel is playing back louder. Right? 9 times out of 10 with these decks, it's not the recording levels, it's the playback levels. And that's down to wear and tear on the head, or it could be, you know, wiring, it could be caps and whatever else. But it's still playing well, and it still sounds well. A very small change has occurred somewhere in the deck that has caused this imbalance. Now it is a very small change because the deck sounds fantastic, to be honest with you. It's just the levels that are off a little bit. So we can micro adjust to make up for it. We are presuming in the service docs that this head that's in there is still brand new, and it's very far from brand new. So we need to adjust and take a bit of wear and tear into account. So what we're going to do is we're going to adjust those playback levels and see what we can do with that first. So the first thing we're going to do is make a recording, and then I'm going to get my test tape of 400 Hz, and we're going to put it through and balance that out. But Paul, I hear you shout, what if that Bros tape is actually biased over to one channel? Well, let's look at, pick a random tape, pick 20 random tapes. The more you do, the more you'll be convinced. Caribbean Souvenir Sampler, Volume 1, with Calypso, Reggae, Soca, Zouk and Latin. Let's play that, see what happens. We are over to the left-hand channel. I haven't done any measurements, I haven't done anything. I've just used my eyeballs. We know that those gauges are correct, because we've just calibrated them. So, although we shouldn't use these gauges for calibration, we should use our oscilloscope. It's a great first indication as to what's going on. We can also look at the pots. That yellow pot in the middle there is the left channel, and you'll notice that if we follow the cross in the middle of the pot, it is pointing almost directly at the top edge of the metal bit that's on it, if that makes sense. If we look at the right channel one, you'll notice it's actually not turned up as far, almost as if somebody's not matched the two as it is. Now, you're going to get a little bit of imbalances across potentiometers, but visually, this is tying in. These two don't match either. So let's calibrate this as per the service manual. So the service manual says, number 7, playback level calibration. We're going to put 400 Hz in on a level tape. Our measurement point is the AC voltmeter to the output jacks. We're going to have the same settings as above, basically Dolby and everything is off. And our adjustment points are VR102 and 202. And it says, adjust VR102 and 202 to obtain 500 millivolts on the AC voltmeter. So you're leveling those two channels out using those two potentiometers, 102 and 202. So we have a 400 Hz test tape in, press play. Oh, level and balance. Exactly as we expected. That's also confirmed on the oscilloscope. There's the smaller channel, which is our right channel. It's not as loud as the left hand channel. If we put them both together so you can see, that's them both together. If you notice, they don't match up. If I match the tops, the bottoms don't match. So one channel is definitely not playing back as loud as the other. So let's adjust that and correct it. So as I adjust this, I'm going to adjust this on the oscilloscope. I'm not going to use the levels as my guide as to where the levels actually are. The level meters on the front, they aren't as accurate as our oscilloscope, but they're a good guide. So as I adjust it on the oscilloscope, you're going to see it on the meters, and then they should match up. So I've got one eye on the oscilloscope, and I'm going to play my tape, and then we're going to do some adjustments. Alright, so we're playing, I've got one eye on my oscilloscope, and we're going to adjust the pot now. I'm watching the oscilloscope, the levels are just about level on the oscilloscope, that is perfect, and as you can see on the dials on the front, matching. It's always going to be a little bit less when we're doing our recordings and playback, just by the levels of the tape. But let's test that on the oscilloscope now. That is both channels displayed now the same. Left, right, left, right, left, right, and together they're overlapping. This is also matching on our gauge on the front. And now we'll do a test record and a playback and see how we are. Alright, so we've got our cheeky tape in there. Levels are good, we're just going to press record and let's record that 400 Hz tone. 400 Hz is the perfect tone for sorting out volumes of recording and playback. Don't use anything silly like 15k or anything like that. 400 Hz is what the service manual recommends, and that's the perfect tone. As you can see in the oscilloscope, if you can, I know the refresh rate's awful, but that's a good tone on both channels matching. So let's stop that, rewind and play it, and then check the oscilloscope. It's still playing some crazy music. There we go. Once the music's finished, matching tone, both levels perfect, exactly what we needed. So pretty straightforward that one actually. In reality, what we've ended up doing is adjusting the playback of one channel to compensate for age of the head. That's my view of it. I've looked at the recording setup in the service manual, and we don't need to touch that. 99 times out of 99, it is not the fault of the recording level pots. It is the fault of age of the head and adjusting the playback level. So this one can go back to the customer now. We'll do a little bit more recording, a little bit more playing about, just to double check everything's fine, and then off it goes back to Nick. Hope you've enjoyed this one. There's another Nakamichi coming up soon, one that is my own personal one with a broken pause button and in need of a service, so we're going to do belts and everything on it, things like that. Have a good weekend. See you soon.